Hey everyone, welcome to the Urban EV Podcast. I'm your host, Rob Hoffman, and every week we bring you real stories and expert insights from the people driving the EV revolution forward. Today's guest is someone who's turning ideas into infrastructure and infrastructure into impact. Anup Parikh is the founder of Pangea Charging, a company helping multifamily and commercial real estate assets implement EV charging solutions, a problem that's near and dear to my heart. He's also the creator and host of The Fast and the Curious, a YouTube series that blends tech, storytelling, and road trip reality checks. We're going to talk about Anoop's journey from big tech to startup life and a sneak peek at an ambitious cross-country EV challenge that he's gearing up for. Anoop, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Rob. Excited to have this conversation with you.
Same here. So for listeners that don't know you yet, how did your journey into the EV space begin?
That is a good question that I usually have a long-winded answer for, but I'm going to try to keep it brief, which if people wanted the full context, there is a YouTube video I produced maybe 2 years ago called Layoffs to Payoffs, the Pangea Charging Story. But the quick of it is, I worked at big tech. It was Google from 2009 to 12. And I just knew I needed more, and I was always interested in sustainability. And so in 2013, when I was doing a new job search after leaving big tech, I said, if I'm going to leave a company like Google, I should do something that's really hitting that passion of mine. Went to LinkedIn, which I would say back then is very different than now. It was still very much a job search site, and found a company called SemiConnect. Ended up applying, getting the offer and the job. So for those who may be new, but those who are also experienced, know that SemiConnect was acquired by Blink in the last 3 years. And so I worked there for 2 years. That was my first foray into EV charging. Ate it up, loved it. And, for those who get to know me more, it's just I eventually left the industry for a while because the market, you have to imagine 2013 to 15 selling EV charging in Houston, oil gas capital of the world. It just wasn't there yet, and probably still isn't there yet. But yeah, so I have worked at SemiConnect, ChargePoint, and then went to create Pangea Charging. After developing those relationships, contacts, expertise, have been able to grow and build my own business.
All right, so talk to us more about Pangea Charging. What problem are you trying to solve?
The biggest one of all, which is I feel like doesn't get the love and attention it deserves, which is I think we truly unlock mass electrification at the light duty side if we put in chargers and get them installed at multifamily. So apartments, condos, anywhere that's not a single family home, right? Yeah, so to simplify it is I tell people soup to nuts. I mean, everyone's heard that expression. So you have a desire and a need to put in charging stations at your building, commercial real estate. You don't know how to solve that. So you need to know the products, the solutions. I will consult you on that, and then we will procure it for you, and we'll turnkey take care of the installation for you. So again, full project lifecycle. But yeah, this industry knows very well. If you live at a place that has a garage, you can plug in, it's already built into your home, quite easy, instant adoption pathway. But when you live in apartments, which is an overwhelming amount of the population, I think somewhere north of 30% of them.
Count me as part of that.
There you go. Now I'm curious. See, do you have a charger at your building?
I do not. I use public charging.
You're in New York, right?
Yeah, Brooklyn.
Okay. So parking, do you own a car?
I own a car. I've got a Kia EV9. It was kind of the impetus for me starting this podcast. I've been pining to get an EV for so many years, and the biggest roadblock was the lack of charging. And unfortunately for me, my lot is a private lot, and I hit them up and I asked them, and they said, no way, no how. We're not interested in putting a charger in there, no matter how much I begged and pleaded and told them how much it made sense. And for me, I'm one of the few people, I don't want to call myself brave, maybe stupid, but I realized that there's a pilot program for public chargers in New York City, and they partnered with a company called Flow. And there happened to be one several blocks away from me. So I kind of bet on the fact that I can use this public charger to basically keep my car charged for the most part while I'm driving around town, and it wouldn't be too much of a hindrance. And it's worked for me, but access to public charging, level 2 public charging, is even tougher than getting your lot electrified. It's really rare right now. So hence, I would still in a millisecond trade that for the ability to charge in my lot.
Yeah. And remind me, you're in Brooklyn, I believe?
In Brooklyn, in North Brooklyn, Greenpoint.
So how far is the Revel charging hubs from you?
They're relatively close, though, but those are level 3 charging hubs. So, the Revel charger is about 10 minutes away. There's another one that's maybe 5 to 7 minutes away. So they're close-ish by, but that's level 3. Level 3 costs twice as much as level 2. So, and with level 2, I can charge to 100%. Level 3, if you want to kind of maintain your battery health, you're typically charging to 80%. So on a day-to-day basis for me, it makes more sense to find the level 2 charging. And it does make sense for me. It does work out. Once again, with the public charger being a few blocks away, typically when I see I'm running down to 20 or 30%, I don't wait till it gets down to zero. I'm like, okay, it's time. I have an app and I can see when those chargers are open. And when they are, I'll go in the evening, I'll plug in. The rates are much cheaper overnight as well, $1 an hour, which is way cheaper than gas on a cost per kilowatt hour per mile kind of thing. And that's it. And I pick it up in the morning. It costs me $20 to fill up my battery to 100%, and I'm good to go for another 2 weeks.
There you go. Yeah, the beauty of it. Yeah, so that's I'm glad you have access, and like you said, right? So that was the mission. I had spent all those years selling to multifamily, and so I'd helped build and flourish the team at ChargePoint when I was there for multifamily. So I was literally flying around the eastern half of the US to meet with all your big names in multifamily. Bozzuto, Greystar, Alliance, Fairfield Residential, Milk, right? The list goes on and on, but
What was their feedback? So you spoke with a lot of the major players over there. How did it go?
There was, man, so this is pre-COVID, which if you ask me, this market popped at least open to the masses post-COVID, like late 2021, where everyone's like, okay, Tesla just charging, and you start to see it a little bit more. And so because I was pitching and selling before that, it was still very much like, okay, like new thing, this team, this person sounds knowledgeable, but there wasn't always action. It was just like, what are the implications for ROI, tax? I can't even remember those conversations, but it's like, hey, in an apartment, I can't even remember the terms, but it's like, this isn't a core part of our business. How does this money generate the EV charging? What are the tax implications? Sometimes conversations got derailed. It's like, this is more simple than you need. You have a washer dryer that you provide as a service to the residents. This is literally just as important, right? The ability to do these fundamental things.
That runs on the same electricity. It's
Exactly.
the same type. It's the 220. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we struck national agreements during my time there, or as I say, I got them across the table, the agreements, and then they went on to do business with ChargePoint after I had departed. But yeah, I'd say those were good conversations. People learned a lot, and then they went on post 2020 to really start ramping up the rollout of EV charging. So you see it at more properties, but whereas there was hesitation to maybe put some in, they probably did the first, call it 10 stations, depending where you're at in the country, right? Like maybe smaller parking facilities in Northeast, Mid-Atlantic, DC, huge ones in California, huge ones in Texas. Texas has yet to still really do wide scale, but California and the coast basically had these incentives, so they were maximizing that.
I almost feel like the incentives really obviously help to get the ball rolling. And I think for a lot of areas, particularly in Texas, I guess you're still waiting on that tipping point, right? For where these developers start hearing enough of the tenants say, hey, or the owners, depending if it's a condo or a rental, hey, I need a charger. And you start hearing that enough, and then all of a sudden you come knocking on their door, and suddenly they realize, hey, this is amenity that people are asking for. And much like a washer and dryer, that's one of those things that differentiates, especially a luxury unit compared to the others, that, hey, we're getting a lot more over here. I mean, I imagine, I don't even imagine, I know it's just a matter of time. Timing is everything.
Right.
But clearly you're seeing right now, California, we know they're leaning in hard. The subsidies are there. It makes so much sense. New York, you're not really touching the New York market anymore right now. So how are things going in Texas, which I do believe I imagine is going to be a laggard?
Yes, and is, because I watched it over the last, what is it now, 11 years. And so I just had a call yesterday, a little deviation from multifamily, but it was a church where I just was there like 2 weeks ago. My niece was playing basketball, and I always notice when I go to after school activities or things like this, I'm like, all these parents are driving EVs. And so I take pictures, I count them, and I sent this picture to the church facilities guy, and we had a conversation yesterday. He said, and it was a real bummer to hear, because I'm like, I know people can say it, but then when you hear that that's the reality, it's more frustrating, which is, he said that, we looked at it about a year or two ago. It's definitely like in consideration, but we have donors and members of the church who are big oil guys. And so
My
they
God.
just like, I know, I just like, my face instantly dropped when I hear that, because it's like, how do you let industry in that way affect like what's good for the rest of two people who donate? Like, I don't know. I go on a whole different tangent when money buys life and all the things that happen. That's a really disappointing reality for me. But yeah, that should give you an idea. So that was a church in Texas, and the person I spoke with, he was all on board. He's like, I know this is good. We have people who drive electric. It is good for future generations, all the things that come with that. But if the donors don't want it, then we're just not
Yeah.
going to do it. So
Yeah.
he's,
For them, it's a complete threat. I would hope that with Elon Musk based in Texas, there's an interesting stat which I read fairly recently that only 1 in 5 EV purchasers are Republican. So if you live in a red state, Texas in particular, with the home of Elon Musk, you just figure that sooner or later they're gonna get that message that, hey, this is not a liberal thing anymore. That driving EV is for all, and maybe the red states can identify with Musk and Tesla now, since Tesla's lost so much of its audience on the left side of the aisle, that maybe this is the future. But still, there's so much economic interests of Texas and Houston that are kind of completely tied to oil. So, I can see this being specifically an uphill battle for you. But no matter what, I think the takeaway from all of us who are in the industry and have eyes and are just paying attention, it doesn't matter whether or not there's these sort of temporary downturns, when you're looking at the EV uptake. This is the future. This is inevitable. It's not going to happen overnight, but we're going to hit 50% before you know it. And once again, when you think about tipping points and when that happens, and when the charging infrastructure is robust enough, that's it. You're going to get them, you're going to still get people holding on to gas cars no matter what. But this is where, as an amenity in your space anyway, if a luxury co-op condominium rental doesn't have it, they're going to be losing business, and I think that's when things are going to change. But yeah, with the oil money that's so deeply intertwined in Texas, I think you've got some challenges ahead of you.
which is wild, just because I know plenty of, right, all anecdotal conversations, but there's a guy I know in the really prominent in the oil and gas industry here. He's very digitally focused and on social media. He got a Tesla, and it's kind of like, and then of course I speak to, I think it was in a hotel, I think, and she's like, yeah, we get a lot. We're next door to a building where a lot of oil and gas executives, they'll fly in from whatever company they're coming in from. They get either rental Teslas or they own one and they're driving in, and it's like, so you literally told me that, and then we still don't want to put in chargers. I don't know.
I think it's going to take time for people in oil to come around, but it's going to happen. And in the end, you're going to take all of your money as you realize that oil it's not a dying industry, but it's certainly probably peaked. Why not invest some of your capital into the business that's likely going to be eating into your profits? It's really interesting that Lucid is backed by Saudi oil money. It's like, hey, there's a nice hedge over there.
Right.
Yeah. So, it's going to come around. You're going to have your laggards. I really hope, Anoop, you keep hanging in there. I know this is going to be a really interesting story. I want to kind of check in with you again in another year to see how things are going, particularly in Texas.
Yeah.
But let's move on a little bit. While you have a fascinating journey, obviously from the tech world into the EV space, but you're more than just Pangea. You're also a YouTuber, and you created the Fast and the Curious. So talk to me more about that show and how it got started, and what that show's all about.
Sure. So thank you for like sharing that. So the Fast and the Curious, which for those watching, if you go to search that term, you're not going to find it as easily. It leads to another channel. Kudos to whoever came up with that name first. But what I would recommend is, if you're watching this and you want to find that channel, search the term entrepreneurs with an S at the end in EVs, EVS. So entrepreneurs in EVs, and you'll land to the channel. And so how that started was in 2019, right? So I was at ChargePoint collecting a check. So I had more freedom and time to think and do things. Because of course, as an entrepreneur, I'd fallen off on the channel for a little while. But 19, I don't know exactly the date, but I remember going to bed one time thinking like, and this name just popped in my head, entrepreneurs and EVs. I was like, just a play on the word. And it got me thinking along the likes of Jerry Seinfeld's Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee and things of that nature. So I said, okay, I've got the name. Now I want, what does it do? What does it look like? And so I started thinking about it and asked my friend Matt, who's a phenomenal professional editor. I said, hey, could we pilot something like this where I go find an entrepreneur? At the time, it didn't start with entrepreneurs in the EV space because, again, it wasn't that big in 2019. And so reached out to a couple people, finally landed on one guy who gave me a shot. He was a young entrepreneur and he was doing a concept that was basically like shuttle service with Teslas between three of the major Texas metros, Austin, Dallas, Houston. And so, yeah, we just got in his Tesla, threw up a bunch of GoPros, chatted, and it was just fun for me because I've always had this interest in film and production through my friend Matt. And when I saw the final touches from raw to final production, I was just so amazed. And I said, this is fun. Like, I would love to do more of this. And so we started having fun with that. I went out to do man on the street interviews, other founder interviews. To me, I think I saw a lot of people get value from it. It's like, this wasn't just kind of, and again, social media has changed a lot in the last 5 years. I don't think TikTok was quite as big in early 2019. But yeah, so I think people are finding enjoyment in the authenticity, the questions being asked of founders. So I tell people it's a bit of edutainment. I'm sure that term gets thrown around a lot now, but I really tell people when I do those segments, entrepreneurs and EVs, I call it a mix between 60 Minutes and Jimmy Fallon.
Now, you don't just interview founders, because really one of my favorite episodes was one you did recently. You went to Trump's inauguration to talk to essentially the MAGA types that were in the audience.
Yeah.
Talk to me more about that episode.
Yeah, I had no idea what to expect. I had friends, just I think I'm going to share their comments, which was like, you know, why would you go? Like, they clearly don't want to talk to you. It's electric vehicles. They're not driving them. They don't care. They don't want to talk to you about this. And when I have a vision, I go for it. So I'm just like, all right, say no, say no. I've got the vision. I know I'm capable of this. So I get out there and yeah, don't know what to expect, but I knew it would make for good content. And for me, honestly, I enjoy educating. So I knew if I get out there, what I think is just true for the world right now, and certainly the States, this side doesn't like EVs, this side likes EVs. And we just stick to that narrative. It's like, did you talk to the other side? Did you hear what they had to say? And so for me, I just at an age where it's like, you do have to listen to people. Everyone wants to be listened, right? This is why you and I are having this conversation. I want to hear what you have to say. You want to hear what I have to say. And not everything has to be a debate. So when I went out there, I just had a list of questions, generally kind of high level, like, what do you think about EVs? Why wouldn't you drive them? What do you think is the role? Is it political? All these kinds of questions, right? I'd obviously encourage folks, maybe we can share that link or something and go watch it. But people had asked me like, oh, I don't know how you had the patience to do that. And, you handle that well. Cause like, yeah, I'm just not going to have a debate. I'm going to share your thoughts with the world. And that's what I feel like people want, is just listen for a moment. Don't interrupt and say, well, actually EV is this. Well, actually you're wrong about, no, you're literally going to push them away.
So I thought some of those takes that you received were really interesting. And part of it was almost disheartening. You're like, oh my God, this is like impenetrable. Some of these people, it's like they're so kind of locked in their political views that they just associate clearly EVs with the devil. But others had more balanced and nuanced takes. It was really fascinating. What did you learn from the non-EV community through making the show about their take, and what the potential pathways are to kind of for the message to resonate with them?
So I would say my takeaway was that people aren't, at least now, right? So this is literally a couple months ago, January 2025. The hesitation is not the car. People seem to like, yep, Tesla's amazing. I think the cars are amazing. The technology is amazing. People would always say you can't go very far. And what they ultimately mean is it isn't the range of the car. Something I posted about on LinkedIn today. I don't believe in range anxiety, and I think that term is not the correct term. It's charger anxiety, infrastructure anxiety. What you have is a skepticism of, is there enough charging ports and availability out there? So I would say the summary would be, yeah, these people aren't not bought into EVs. They're, call it pessimist, or just not under the belief that there's enough charging to get them from here to there. Of course, all of us in the industry will say, well, how many times are you doing these long trips? So yes, I drove from Houston to DC and back, but I'm not doing that for a long time. And I hadn't done that for the last 15 years, that sort of, 3,000 mile round trip drive average all of us are doing is, I'll even give people the benefit out. In a day, maybe 100 miles, but you're always going to be able to come home and get pretty much close to all of that back overnight when you plug in.
I've also, from my take and speaking to enough people, I know it's irrational, right? You know that 90, 95, 98% of miles driven are kind of, within 30 miles of home. And there are outliers out there who are real road warriors. But do you think it's just that simple? Because there's certain corridors right now where there's a lot of infrastructure. To be quite honest with you, if you drive a Tesla, they've already pioneered that years ago. Everyone else is trying to play catch up right now. But for a lot of people, there should not be an issue finding a charger on the road. So you think it's just as simple as just having enough chargers? Or do you think really the hindrance is the fact that no matter what, it's going to take you on the best of circumstances 20, 25 minutes to fill up? And I don't have the time for that.
Ooh, that's a good question. Because of course I haven't traversed the entire US, and I would imagine it has to be, I assume, true. Middle America, like there are going to be roads. Like I went through in that trip a portion in Mississippi, which would have been a state highway. I mean, I feel like I drove at night, let's call it 50 to 80 miles, where I know there was no charging station.
Well, I believe that. Yeah.
So it's kind of like there were certainly gas stations. And so my belief would be that there isn't necessarily charging everywhere. It's always enough, but it's not going to be convenient in that it was on your path. You might have to make a detour, but you'll still get from point A to B. The question is, did you make it in the time you wanted to? Maybe not.
All right. I mean, I could counter that with how many people are driving through Mississippi.
Right.
Not many. I mean, some are. But
Right.
of course, it depends. It's very micro type of situation here in your local area, relatively local. Obviously, you open up the aperture and over the 500-mile radius around you. What's the situation looking like? In certain areas, it looks fantastic. In others, it's not so great. The charging networks are not matured. I hope you're right, and it's as simple as that. Because obviously, the infrastructure continues to grow, the battery technology continues to get better. Not that the Chinese tech is coming here anytime soon, but they've already got cars that are supposedly slated for production that can charge up in an insanely short amount of time. Obviously, the infrastructure even there needs to catch up and to be able to charge those cars as fast. But you can see the writing on the wall where these things are going. And hopefully, when these things have caught up, whether it be next year, 5 years from now, or longer, I'm hoping that that's going to change a lot of people's minds. But once again, I think when this is also tied up in politics, people are willing to cut off their nose to spite their face. So maybe it's interesting to see. Your take. Your show was very interesting to see the perspective of the other side.
Yeah.
Okay, so speaking of long distance trips, I know you've got something in the books right now. You're planning some sort of endurance test for yourself. Why don't you talk to us more about what your goal is and how you're going to do it?
Yeah. So that road trip that I just did in January, Houston to DC, was in my head a 10-day pilot, ended up being 12 days of what would be a longer 90-day trip around the entire US. And so this has been a thought and project and vision that's been fermenting in my head since literally the peak of the pandemic. So like July of 2020, I drove Houston to Colorado. And I just remember thinking, I drove it, I didn't have an EV at the time. I drove in my Honda Accord, and it was just such an interesting time by every measure, right? Politics, society, business, economy, all of it. And I mean, you even had actually a lot of people right coming out of the pandemic, like, oh, you could see the peaks of the Himalayan mountains. And it's like, yeah, pollution. Like, so it sounds like I had thought the click had finally happened. People are like, oh, yeah, like when you don't drive, air gets cleaner. And so it's like, yes, we are on the verge of like this shift. And then, of course, it didn't happen. But all that to say is, I just remember thinking, I'm passing through these places, mask, no mask, people at gas stations, like, man, I would love to talk to you and just what's going on through your head, right? I have a natural curiosity. But I had pre-ordered a Rivian in like 2018, I think. And I was like, man, it would have been great if I had this Rivian during this time because it would be new on the roads. Not a lot of people would have had exposure. I could ask them about what they think about it, ride with me. So yeah, that was the inspiration. But yeah, so I've just been thinking about new ideas. So the idea is to wrap everything you've seen already on that YouTube channel, man on the street interviews, founder interviews as entrepreneurs in EVs. And really, the nature of this trip, how I think about it is I'm calling it two things. One is to shine a spotlight and connect the dots of the industry. So when I think about our industry, I'll speak with someone at a charging station like, oh, that's cool. You're in the business. It'd be great. Like they need a mobile charging business. I'm like, yeah, it exists. And the fact that you drive an EV and don't know, that's a problem by the company, right? They haven't reached you. Oh, be me and my buddy have been thinking about starting a preventive maintenance business. Yeah, that exists. You didn't know that? And so it's like, or if you're real estate, it doesn't matter, but these folks don't know in our industry who exists. And so for me, this trip is to sew up all the parts and loose parts of this business. And yeah, I mean, I want everyone to win. So it's whatever that expression, I always butcher it, the tide lifts all boats. But
Yeah.
I don't know. I've said that so many times now. I don't know why I haven't perfected. But if I can showcase 90 days, like 4 companies doing very different aspects of this business, I think people like, okay, it's a legitimate industry. There are jobs, there's opportunities, there's people servicing all these concerns I have. And I want to grease and get rid of all that friction of those excuses or all the things, right? So, oh, maybe, hey, they're expensive. Okay, well, since the last time you looked, costs have come down. There's a company that finances, there's a company who puts it in for no cost, right? So it's just people need to hear this message. And from a personal side, I say it's like going to be the Forrest Gump of the EV industry, like this
Yeah.
randomness of me just exploring the US, but all these stories are going to get woven together, you know?
Are you planning on, like, are there people you're going to be connecting with along the route? I mean, I imagine your route's already been mapped out, or are you going to literally be just springing this on man on the street questions and just kind of popping your head into businesses and really kind of doing some intrepid reporter work?
Yeah, I mean, if I may use this, your podcast, your platform as an opportunity to pitch it with Rob, is that all right?
Yeah, please, of course.
So it's, I'm looking for a multitude of players. So if I've had people even say, oh, well, we're fleet, so we don't want to talk to consumers. Like, no, understand that if you're in the EV space, anywhere in that value chain, let's promote you and let's highlight you. So I will stop in. I actually spoke to a real estate event that's going to hopefully time with my schedule where it's in Seattle. So I'll go speak with commercial people involved in the retail and hospitality side. And that'll be interesting because now people watching like, okay, that's how the real estate side thinks. I want to talk to utility players. I want to talk to software, hardware, installers, right? So very what I call pollinating the industry. And of course, yeah, consumers too.
Are you planning on, it's a 90-day trip? That's long. That's a really massive road trip. How often are you going to be dropping videos, or are you going to be actually live casting some of these moments?
So here's the tricky part I'm in. It is a long trip. It does require hard costs. I mean, I'm actively finding companies, interviewees that want to be interviewed, and sponsors. I mean, quite honestly, so I've done the math, right? Accommodation is going to be my hardest cost for 90 days. So I am finding folks who want to be involved in this project that's going to tell the entire story and really going to show off the key players. And so, yeah, trying to raise between 60 to 100,000 to produce this. I've got one party involved. They're a pretty prominent name in the EV charging hardware side of the business, so they're on board. Got a turnkey installer on board. But going back, yeah, 90 days. It's long, involves money, production. So as far as dropping videos, like I've got to pay a videographer. For those who saw this last series, I thought he did an amazing job. And we're
You
dropping
did.
videos daily. But for a 90-day trip, I'm thinking we're going to scale that back to like weekly because I think,
Hmm.
it just makes sense. It was honestly very taxing to produce videos every 24 hours to film, edit. So I think a week would be a nice story to share, like, hey, we made it from here to here. Here's what happened. And then, of course, the biggest parts being these entrepreneurs and EV sort of conversations.
I love it. I love it. When do you plan on being in New York?
Let's see. So if I'm able to hit the road by mid-May, which is still ambitious, let's call it kind of like mid to late July.
Okay, I'm going to mark my calendar. You have to stop by here in North Brooklyn, so please make that a mandatory stop. All right, that's wonderful. I'm super duper rooting for you over here. I think it's an amazing project, and I think you're going to get a lot of eyeballs on it. I know I'm going to tune in personally. Okay, so let's look ahead right now. What's next for Pangea? Obviously, the Fast and the Curious. This is a massive project, so we know what's going on there. But how about Pangea itself?
So that's a really great question because I guess in that whole story I just told you, is that it gives me the perfect opportunity to be out there, boots on the ground, pitching and positioning my business. On this trip when we stopped at a barbecue restaurant in Durham, North Carolina, I get to chat with the owner. Hey, I'm here eating because I need to. And then, hey, by the way, this is what I do for work. This is why the cameraman's with me. We're talking about this topic. So for Pangea Charging, I would say because of the noise and the messiness right now of the overall economy and the industry even, I've always been really customer focused, but I feel like the root is you got to be boots on the ground. Nobody is like reached that many connection away person that's in, I don't know, Toledo, Ohio. And when you get boots on the ground, you get them to follow, you create just a lot of good things, right? Organic growth, people who are like, hey, I've never met a person who works in this industry. I've only heard of Elon Musk. So yeah, when you shake a hand, it's just that, I don't know. I feel like if I was on the receiving side of that, like, okay, cool. I met somebody who's really out here teaching. And if I have a need, this is who I would call.
I almost forgot to ask you, what vehicle are you going to be driving?
It would be my electric F-150, Ford F-150 Lightning.
Nice.
It's
I love it.
roomy and
Love it.
it's got the ability to carry the cargo that I'll need for 90 days.
What's the range on the highway with that truck?
Oh, there was so many times where I wanted to measure, but I would say, right, so it's marketed as 300, it's 131 kilowatt hour battery. They promote it as
The big battery.
320 miles. I would say highway, as you know, gets worse than city. So, I was always comfortable doing if it was a fully full charge, 320, I would be comfortable driving 250. But typically between charges, I was pushing no more than 220.
Okay. And that's kind of close to what I get in my EV9, which is sufficient. There's obviously better vehicles out there that can go longer distances. Lucid, once again, mentioned earlier, is one of them. Rivian as well. Had you gotten that one, they can go a little further. This is one of those things I think also in full transparency to everyone who's got issues with EVs. If you read between the lines on what it really means with range, I think we have to be transparent about what, range really equals on highway miles. I think exactly what you mentioned there is correct. You take a haircut when you're on the road, you're typically charging up to 80%, not 100%, so you're losing 20% right there. On the highway, you're losing another 10 to 15%. The EVs are much, much more efficient in the city where you get better than what the projected range is, which is incredible. But for road tripping, I know that basically the time you need to go to the bathroom, stretch your legs, what have you, I feel like 250 is about the sweet spot where most people kind of give up. So I feel if your EV can go that far, you're in really good hands. A little less than that, and sometimes you're stopping a little more often than you want to. That's just the reality of where EVs are today, especially a big truck like an F-150.
Yeah, because 250 miles, I've done that from Houston. That's about the distance from Houston to Dallas, which is about a 4.5 hour drive. Like 100%, I need to stop to eat or use the bathroom in that 4 hour window. So, yeah, I would say that's accurate.
All right. So, any advice for aspiring EV entrepreneurs or creators out there?
Ooh, definitely jump in. There's tons of opportunity, in my opinion. That's the other thing, like, right? This road trip's to promote the industry and the economy because I remember speaking with some young Gen Zers maybe it was like a year or two ago, and she was looking for work. I said, had you thought about the EV industry or just like sustainability? And I was surprised because she said, no, I didn't know. And I was like, oh man, like again, we live on LinkedIn, you and I'm sure, we see all this stuff, but I don't know if we're getting outside of our bubble, right? Like how many in healthcare or education, any of these people who want a career shift, how many know all this opportunity that exists here? And even those who've been in manufacturing jobs, trades, but yeah, I think there's so much opportunity.
Wonderful. All right. Well, we're running up on time right now. Anoop, thank you so much for joining the show. Can you once again remind the listeners where they can find Pangea Charging or your YouTube channel?
Yeah, so please definitely go follow Pangea Charging on all your major platforms, but I would say the key ones, if you want the best content, LinkedIn for sure. Follow me on LinkedIn, Anup Parikh. Pangea Charging is on Instagram, YouTube, and LinkedIn, and the same is true for the fast and the curious. So again, YouTube would be the primary one, and then Instagram if that's where you're at.
Fantastic. All right. So that's a wrap on today's ride. A huge thanks to Anup Parikh for joining the show and sharing his insights and vision for a smarter, more accessible EV future. If you want to keep up with Anup, reminder to check out Pangea Charging and definitely subscribe to the Fast and the Curious YouTube channel, especially with that wild cross-country ride that he's got in the books. It's going to be fantastic, and I really can't wait to see it myself. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to follow the Urban EV Podcast and leave us a rating or review. It helps more people plug into these conversations. You see what I did there? The dad jokes, they never end. The road to sustainability starts at the plug, and that's why we're here. We will see you all next week on a new episode of the Urban EV Podcast.